Well, hiya. I'd just like to say what a pleasure it is to be back in Zagreb. And the weather means a lot to me after the last time I was here, when we talked in a thunderstorm for 4 hours. And my computer is just still in the process of recovering. But I was, to say I was surprised is an understatement. I was shocked to see the interest here in my work and the information I'm dealing with. And so immediately after I was here last time, I said I would love to come back and do the whole thing. And by the whole thing, I mean 7 hours, and I could do 9, and I could do 10. Because I've been on a journey for the last 20 years, which I started in the early 1990s, about 1991. And I had a trickle of information to start with, and then it became increasingly a flood. And this information from all over the world, because I've been to about 50 countries researching this and talking now, has shown me very clearly that the forces that appear to be in control of the world and making decisions that direct the future of the world are not the forces that we think they are. They're not the men in dark suits called presidents and prime ministers. They are the hidden hand, what I call the shadow people, that orchestrate the direction of the world. And what I call the come and go politicians in every country are merely there for a short period of time to administer into legislation the ongoing agenda. So while Croatia may have a left government or a right government and then switch between them, or a center government, it doesn't matter, because the direction continues to be the same. What we've seen now, and I predicted this back in November and earlier last year, we are seeing now in America that Mr. Change, Mr. Genuine Man, who is here to represent the interests of the people, is actually a total fake. And what we're seeing with Barack Obama is the classic example of what I'm talking about. Different masks, same face. And so what we've seen in America, I talked about this technique when I was here last, and it's something that I've been writing about for nearly 20 years. It's a technique that I call problem, reaction, solution, where you create the problem. It could be a war, it could be a credit crunch, whatever. You then tell the people, through an unquestioning mainstream media, the version of that problem that you want the people to believe, i.e. bin Laden orchestrated 9/11 from a cave in Afghanistan. 19 hijackers that couldn't fly one-engine planes suddenly manifested the ability to fly wide-body jets with extraordinary skill. You look at stage 2 of this technique, problem, reaction, solution, for a reaction from the public of fear, of outrage, and basically do something about this problem. And then those who've covertly created the problem then offer the solution to the problem they have covertly created. And this is changes in legislation and society that lead to the agenda for the centralization of power in the world moving forward ever faster. And what we're seeing in America now is the presidential version of problem, reaction, solution. They brought in Mask A, called George Bush, who clearly wasn't controlling America. I mean, he couldn't even tie his shoelaces on a bad day, I'm sure. And he came in to bring the problems of overseas wars and invasions and occupations, and towards the end, the global economic crisis, which has been totally and utterly engineered as a problem to be provided with a solution. And so Bush was the problem in this scenario. He was there to create the problems. You then had, particularly towards the end of the Bush era, the reaction from the public of anyone but Bush. We want anyone but Bush. Fear about the economic situation, etc. And so along came mask number 2, the ever-smiling, I'm a man of the people, Barack Obama, and he is the solution. He is coming in, he's already doing it, to offer solutions to the problems that Bush created. And these solutions are, one after the other, more centralization of power, more control of the population, and all the things that he was going to do and change that Bush introduced, things like holding people without trial, etc. He's reversing that now he's in office, because that's what he was always going to do. So it became clear as the years passed that forces are pushing the world in a direction of an Orwellian centralized global dictatorship. And the people we call politicians are just there to come and go and give the illusion of the people making decisions and running their own society, when in fact this hidden hand is the one that's orchestrating events, which is why when governments change, the direction of the world does not change. And in relation to Croatia, it's almost funny, if it wasn't tragic, that, for instance, the Habsburg family, who are fundamentally involved with this hidden hand and have been for centuries, they were the rulers of Croatia for a long, long time. But of course, Croatia got rid of the Habsburgs. They're no longer involved in controlling Croatia, it says here. Well, the Croatian government is about to join the European Union. The European Union is, in effect, the union of the Habsburgs. The European Economic Community was manipulated, the free trade zone, the common market, by an organization that started decades before called the Pan-Europa movement. Who heads the Pan-Europa movement? The Habsburg dynasty. Who is the head of it to this day? Otto von Habsburg. And if I can get just one thing across this weekend, it's, for goodness sake, would Croatia please start looking at the consequences of what is about to be done in its name. 75% of the laws passed in Britain, and therefore imposing restrictions, impositions upon British people, today come not from the British Parliament, but from bureaucrats in the European Union. Now, we joined in 1972-73. And I've watched stepping stone style, step by step by step, more and more rules, regulations and laws come in, sub-clauses, fine print, which has turned the Brussels bureaucracy into an unelected dictatorship, which imposes its will upon the people, not just of Britain, but every country in the European Union. Now, we've seen those laws come step by step by step by step. Croatia is not going to see it come step by step by step, because already now there is a vast tidal wave of highly detailed laws, rules and regulations, which the moment the Croatian government signs Croatia into the European Union, everyone in this country becomes subject to. You know, this is not an invasion of Croatia through soldiers massing on the border. This is an invasion of Croatia through legislation amassing on the border. In fact, it's got across the border, because even though Croatia is not in the European Union yet, its flag flies with the flag of Croatia on government buildings. And when that document is signed, and there seems to be little debate going on, when that document is signed, this country becomes a subordinate asset of a bureaucracy that beggars belief. Where's the debate? Everyone in politics seems to be agreed it's a good idea. Does anyone there ever do any research about what's behind the European Union and what the agenda is? If you're a few people and you want to control the many, what is absolutely essential to you doing that? Centralizing decision making. The more diversity of decision making you have, the less control any central force can have over it. There's just too many things to control. But when you move decision making over more and more and more people's lives into the hands of fewer and fewer people, then the few can dictate to the many. And that's what the European Union is. You know where the word fascism comes from? It comes from the fasci, the symbol from the Roman Empire of rods tied together, individuality tied together and ruled by the axe head at the top. I have just described the European Union, which is where every country within the Union takes its dictated laws, legislation, cans and can'ts from a tiny bureaucracy at the center. And Croatia is about to sign that away. When did Croats first come here? 7th century? This land? Mm-hmm. Well, forget Croatian culture once the Union takes over. People say, oh, well, we'll be able to go and live in London, yeah. And people from all over the Union will come and live here and take the jobs and everything. It doesn't matter. Borders come down, the throttle goes both ways. And, you know, we're having articles all the time now in British newspapers saying, what is it to be British anymore? What happened to the British culture? What is it? Is it eggs and bacon in the morning? What is it? Why? Because the greatest, or one of the greatest problems that the manipulation has in creating this global dictatorship is a sense of nationhood. And, you know, I don't go for the, you know, national borders thing. I mean, I was born in Britain because I had to be born somewhere. I don't care where I was born, you know. But people who have a sense of nationhood, a sense of culture, that is a big resistance to anyone who comes along and says, actually, we want to take your ability to govern yourselves and we want to hand it to some world government and some bureaucratic dictatorship. So what's happening all around the world, European Union is a wonderful example, is they're bringing down borders on purpose, as they are with the Mexican border in America, to have people from all different cultures pour into all different cultures, to break down this sense of nationhood so that you're breaking down the resistance to this centralized global dictatorship. What they're doing in America now is destroying America by using America to destroy itself. And of course we saw that during the Bush years. America has a tremendous sense of nationhood. I mean, this is America, 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 you know, land of the free and all that stuff. And so if somebody came along to America in that mode and said, we want to take the control of your country into a European, an American version of the European Union, which is what they're planning, called the American Union, North American Union to start with, then that sense of this is America, that cultural identification, would produce tremendous resistance to that. This is America. You can't go and rule us from somewhere else. So what they're doing, and they're well on the way now, has been systematically destroying America militarily and economically. America is now an economic catastrophe. It's not a crisis, it's a catastrophe. I was there for 2 months earlier this year, and tent cities. People who not too long ago had what they call middle-class jobs. They were car salesmen and all this other stuff. Now they're living in tents because of what's going on there. This is not kind of pouring this out in the mainstream media, but that's the reality. And when you get people in a situation of desperation, which is increasingly what's happening in America, then people who are desperate will agree to things, solutions, that they would otherwise fiercely resist. And what we're going to see, and we're going to see Barack Obama start to push this, especially if he goes to 2 terms, the movement of bringing together Canada, America, and Mexico in a North American Union and replacing the dollar with a currency that has a working title called the Amero, to replace the dollars of Canada and America and the Mexican peso. And of course, the mighty dollar was never going to be replaced when the dollar was mighty. But you destroy the dollar, and my goodness me, they're on the brink of it, then people become open in desperation. Well, yeah, well, anything. We've got to do something to sort this economic situation out. And the thing again with America is that if you want a world centralized dictatorship with people sitting around one table in a world government dictating to every country, you cannot have superpowers. You cannot have superpowers that have the military and financial might to say no to the world government. We're not doing that. So what they're doing is systematically destroying America as a superpower, and Barack Obama has been sent in there with his smiling face to finish the job, or at least take it massively forward. And I've been talking about this now for nearly 20 years and writing about it. And what was in my books years ago, and in the books of others too, is now daily experience. And before I take questions, I'll just make this point about a very topical issue, which is the credit crunch, as they call it, the economic collapse. First of all, it's far, far, far worse than they're saying. The idea of this engineered collapse is to go in 3 stages. We're in the middle of stage 2. In fact, we're well into stage 2. Stage 1 was to collapse the world economy. Stage 2 was to get governments to react to that collapse by hurling enormous, staggering amounts of borrowed money at the problem. To have that money basically disappear, never mind not make a difference to the problem, disappear. Which is why we're now having people from the Federal Reserve and other government financial agencies in America being asked by congressional and Senate committees, where did the trillions go? And the answer, and you can see it on YouTube, the interactions, these government officials are basically saying, we don't know. Because stage 2 was to, and is to, empty the guns of world governments in terms of reacting to the economic crisis. And that allows them then to go to stage 3, which is coming, and that's to collapse the world economy on an even greater scale than it has happened now. At which point, there is no response left for governments. Economic catastrophe, desperation. That is the greatest form of mind manipulation. If you want people to agree to what you want, and they would not agree to it in other circumstances. And what's coming, and it's already being floated in there in newspaper articles by these various people, they are going to say this global economic collapse is so extraordinary that the only way of reacting to it is to have a completely new global economic structure based on a world central bank, which will dictate the finance of every country on the planet, and eventually to replace every nation's currency with a single electronic world currency to bring about total global financial dictatorship. And that's coming. And already we're seeing people like Gordon Brown, the Prime Minister of Britain, saying we need a new global financial architecture, which is Orwell's speak for a world centralized dictatorship of finance. And what they've done brilliantly is to so centralize world power through what we call, we've got a name for it now, globalization. They've reached a point of globalization where they say, hey, we have globalization now, so now we need a new economic and political global structure to cope with the globalization which we've actually brought about, but we're not telling you that. And humanity is now facing a big fork in the road. And sitting on backsides, wondering when the next game show is on, is not an option if we want to take the direction in that fork in the road that leaves anything like human freedom. Because if we don't change direction, and if the people do not start imposing their will upon the few, we are going to live in a centralized fascist global dictatorship within 10 years. And I'm probably being optimistic.